and share my screen here. All right. Get this back up. All righty. So here we are. Thanks everybody again for joining us tonight for our final edition here of the Stibnite River Rat, at least this round. And tonight we're really honored. We're joined by Emmett Taylor. We'll be joined by Emmett Taylor. He's a Nez Perce tribal member and director of the tribe's Watershed division, as well as Wesley Keller, who's been working with Nez Perce tribe for 17 years. And is the project leader for the Nez Perce Tribe's Watershed Division and based out of the McCall office. Tom is saying my microphone is a little low. See if I can change that, but don't know if that's something I can change. I'll try to speak up here, but appreciate the heads up. But tonight, our focus, we've had a little bit of a back and forth as we were getting ready for what we were going to be talking about tonight. And really the focus or goal that I hope everyone leaves tonight with is really maybe an understanding. We're trying to push back a little bit on what I like to think some of the myths that are, for lack of a better word, being perpetuated about this project and how the best way to move forward when dealing with some of the legacy issues that currently exist out at Stibnite. And, you know, we're being told quite a bit that the best way to move forward, especially by the proponent of the project, is to, you know, by remining this area, we'll have the resources and ability to move forward and finally address some of the legacy issues that exist on site. And hopefully through some of the slides we'll be going over today and the info that we're going to be sharing with you, you can take another approach to that and prove that that's really just not the only answer. And there's a lot of other viable solutions instead of doubling down on the same practices that got us into this situation to begin with and led to where we're at today. Before we get started though, I do want to thank everyone who's joining us tonight and who has joined the previous two River Rats. Really appreciate all the engagement and support from all of our members and folks in, you know, the public who are interested and care about this issue. And also really want to thank kind of all of our supporting organizations who have helped both present with us, promote these. So Save the South Fork Salmon, Idaho Conservation League, Earthworks, Advocates for the West have all been pivotal partners in, you know, these webinar series that we've hosted so far, and really appreciate all the support and seeing everybody engaged on these issues. But with that, we will kind of get started, and just want to remind everyone to stay muted, please, tonight as we're going through these presentations. We will ask, you know, that you put any questions you have in the chat box. You can feel free to put them in there at any time throughout the presentation or at the end of the slide. We'll definitely have some dedicated time to go over some questions and answers with any of the presenters, and you know that's often some of the best dialogue. But I'm getting some more folks are saying they're having issues here with my microphone. Let's see if I can turn that up. Sorry folks, let's see. For me, it is set all the way up as loud as I can get it to go. I don't really know if that is any better.
Did you, Nick, check your Zoom settings? Because it'll say input microphone.
Yep, it's same as always and all the way up. I don't know what's changed on it. I don't know if it's because I'm recording or what, but let's see. Sorry, everybody, bear with me. I don't know if there's And Sydney and Wes, the same thing. Y'all are having a hard time hearing me. Pretty quiet. Did that change, or was it always quiet when we were in the pre-meeting?
I can hear you loud and clear, so I'm not sure what's going on. I can hear Sydney fine too, and maybe we can ask the members of the audience if they can hear me and Sydney okay, and if it's just your computer or not.
Yeah, you're quieter on my end compared to Wesley, but I can still hear you pretty well.
That's so bizarre. Let me see here. Let me try. Sorry, folks. Switch to headphones and see if that changes anything for us. All right. Is this any better? Can you all still quiet? Can you hear me at all? Any better or worse?
I think it's the same on my end, but I also didn't have a ton of issues.
Gotcha.
Nick, just an idea. I've done this before when I've had trouble. You can call in on your phone and just mute you on the, it's not ideal, but you might have better luck that way.
Let's see here. All right, everybody. Let's see. I'll have to pull up that info for the call. I don't have that pulled up right here. Well, I'll just speak up here and mess with this for a second and let Sydney kind of start here with her slides, and hopefully by then I can get something worked around here. So let's with that, we'll just kind of keep things going and see.
You're good now.
Huh. That is so okay.
Yeah, your volume is much louder now.
That's so strange. Didn't change anything. Technology. Okay. Appreciate everyone's patience. That's how things go. But anyways, as we were saying, we'll hold kind of questions till the end. Appreciate folks letting us know that we're having audio issues. That's how things go sometimes. But again, I guess I'll just kind of start from the top. We're just really going to try to dispel some of the myths as far as the best way to move forward here at Stibnite. We've heard a lot from Perpetua that the best route is going to be remining to give them the resources to address these legacy issues. But we're hopefully going to present some different perspectives and show some information that really take some of the wind out of those sails, that there's plenty of different options. And when you look at this project kind of from a different perspective than what's being portrayed from their view, it really becomes, I think, to me, quite clear that the risk is certainly not worth the reward. And hopefully that gives you all some fuel for comments that you're going to be working on or already submitting or thinking about revising. And with that, we'll just get started, and I will hand it over to Sydney.
Awesome. Thanks, Nick. For those who don't know me, my name is Sydney. I work for Idaho Rivers United as one of their conservation associates. And today I'm going to kind of dive in a little bit about the antimony that's at the Stibnite mine. So as many of you have probably seen Perpetua's media outlets on antimony and how they're pushing to extract it from the Stibnite gold mine. This would mean that the United States would have its first direct source of antimony on its own soil since 2001. And a big argument for Perpetua for mining antimony is that it's listed as a critical mineral resource by the U.S. Department of Interior. However, that's not the full story here. It's not as critical as you would think. And they do not disclose that mining this mineral comes at a major cost to the ecosystem around the South Fork of the Salmon River. The Stibnite mine actually sits near the headwaters of the East Fork of the South Fork of the Salmon River, which makes the river highly susceptible to pollution from acid leaching and other contaminants that escape from the mine. The East Fork and the South Fork of the Salmon River are treasures to locals, and they're also critical habitat for salmon, steelhead, and bull trout that are listed under, which are listed under the Endangered Species Act. And not to mention, this mineral or this site is highly contaminating the area already. The EPA wants to list it on the national priorities list, except the state is not wanting to go through with that. And not only is the site highly contaminated, but antimony itself is listed on the toxic pollutants list. Next slide, please. So kind of diving into two main antimony myths that we've seen with some of Perpetua's PR. They claim that our society's livelihoods depend on antimony, and that Stibnite will make it so that the US would not have to rely on China and Russia for antimony resources. And the myth behind this argument is that the Stibnite project will not be able to supply enough antimony for the United States for very long. Even if this project does push forward, only 35% of our antimony resources will be domestically produced over a 6-year period. So Perpetua estimates from their feasibility study that the mine would produce around 52,000 metric tons of antimony over the lifespan of the project. And USGS published a report on the use of antimony in the US, and it showed that the peak consumption was actually back in 1997, was at 46,000 metric tons, using up most of the antimony at this site. And but now back in 2021, the US uses about 28,000 metric tons. So if we relied on this antimony source for our demand, then it would only last about 2 years maximum. So this means most of our antimony needs still have to rely on forward supply. And even though Perpetua claims of working with domestic partners to process the antimony slurry, the Mod Pro 2 states that in all likelihood, all the antimony will need to be shipped overseas for refinement. And again, the US will still have to rely on other countries no matter what, because of having to send our antimony overseas to complete those processes. Next slide. And the next myth, as many of you probably seen, or Perpetua's agreement with Ambri, and the antimony site, the antimony from this site would be used for their liquid metal batteries, and they keep on pushing how the antimony from Stibnite will be a critical source for green energy, or the green energy future. First off, this is a gold mine. This is not an antimony mine. The antimony is so low grade that the mining for antimony is on its own is uneconomical. The grade of antimony coming from overseas ranges from 4 to 14%. The Stibnite grade is at 0.06%. So false claims are being made about the importance of the antimony from Stibnite gold mine at the expense of harming the surrounding ecosystem and the critical habitat to endangered species. Perpetua Resources has an agreement with Ambri for a portion of the mine antimony to be used for their liquid metal batteries, but antimony is not the only solution for a green energy future. For starters, mining antimony is very destructive for the environment. A study found that one of the most harmful and toxic forms of antimony comes from industrial processes such as mining. The same research noted that antimony easily contaminates soil, sediments, and aquatic ecosystems from leaching from mines. And as mentioned earlier, the Stibnite gold mine does not have a very high abundance of antimony, nor are there any suitable refining plants that aren't overseas. So therefore, the little antimony that can be obtained from this project will have a large carbon footprint just due to the shipping and refining facilities that are overseas. And for a mineral that has a substitutability rate of 90% for its uses, this rare mineral would cause a lot more damage to the tributaries of the South Fork of the Salmon River and the main salmon and surrounding ecosystems without producing a ton of benefits that could be replaced by other resources or methods. Overall, extracting and marking antimony is not a very clean or decarbonizing process. And lastly, the world has already seen the effects of climate change. Perpetua's feasibility study in 2020 stated that their project is still several years away from production, and Ambri's so-called miracle batteries are still in the testing and development stages. And the agreement between Ambri and Perpetua is not as valuable as when we need low carbon and sustainable solutions much sooner rather than later. And in fact, there are other battery options that are becoming on the market much quicker. Sodium ion batteries are one of those examples, and they have taken off as a more environmentally friendly alternative with better storage capacity when compared to lithium ion batteries. And in the end, antimony is very rare. We do not have a domestic supply to support our use. The mineral is not as critical as it's portrayed to be, and the degradation of critical habitat is not worth the mineral source that will not move the needle on the United States future antimony supply. And with that, kind of busting some of the antimony myths, I will pass it over back to Nick.
Thanks, Cindy. And again, yeah, my name is Nick Kuneth. with Idaho Rivers United. And I'm just going to talk really briefly, especially with my little technical delay at the start here, just about, we've hit on it a little bit in some of our past webinars. And I think anyone here who's following this project, is well aware that, the Stibnite mining district is a mining district. It's had activity for the last century, really. But I think something that's often overlooked is just all the work that's already happened within the site that, we'd love to see it look a lot better than it currently does. But I think it's easy to overlook all the small incremental steps that have happened and just kind of talk a little bit more about the history and some of the other alternatives moving forward. So, the photo on the screen is of the Yellow Pine Pit in 45, and that's really when things were kind of at their peak. Folks were prospecting up in the Stibnite mining district back in 1890s, and kind of the first full scale operational gold mines were 1914 to 27 in that range. And a lot of different players were in and out of the scene. A lot of different companies kind of tried their hand in this zone, but it wasn't really until the World War II effort where the open pit mining technology really picked up to really extract the type of ore that exists at Stibnite, kind of low quality, diffuse ore bodies that you need to mine a lot of overburden, and these pit mines really came into favor. But as time went on, all of these mines were subject to the same boom and bust economy struggles that have always been an issue for the extractive industry. And while it's no secret that a lot of the degradation damage that we're seeing happened before, we have a lot of the same environmental laws and policies that would guide mining these days. Kind of the clear through line here is that most often when these companies left, they had no intention at the outset, but things changed. They kind of packed up shop and had to get out of there and left the site worse than it was before they took ownership. And, we're left with the current situation where there's heavy metals contamination in the form of, arsenic and antimony, cyanide in the soil and ground and surface waters, and has really left a big mess up in this area for folks to clean up. But it is being addressed, and I think that's something that isn't really acknowledged as much as it should be. And Sydney had mentioned that, while Stibnite does qualify to be a Superfund site and has been eligible for the national priorities list, it has not, for political reasons, made it across that finish line, but it's still, through the study process, has opened up some funding, and there's been a lot of work done. I mean, mining really ceased in 97, the late 90s, but even before then, they were doing work to try to improve this site. Back in, I'll just kind of list some of these, and these are all taken directly from the EPA's website. Each Superfund site, like Stibnite, whether it's designated or not, they have a history of some of these cleanup actions that have happened on site. And I think it's important just to keep in mind what's happened. And back in 82, Meadow Creek was diverted around some of the tailings that were there. And again, you'll hear Meadow Creek come up quite a bit. That's been a big subject of a lot of remediation. That in 98, again, Meadow Creek was diverted with more tailing stabilization and drainage to avoid contact with these tailings. In 2002, the EPA and Forest Service removed a bunch of toxic tailings from, again, this is from the EPA's own website, from poison ponds in the Meadow Creek floodplain that were, inundated with these tailings that were a high water event filling up and causing a lot of damage downstream. And then again, in 2004, more waste removed from the northwest end of the mine site. In 2005, the Forest Service commenced a lot of work on Lower Meadow Creek itself, as far as rehabilitating that stream section, providing more habitat and making it more viable for the fish and aquatic species that are found up there. And that still, is present to this day. And I think a lot of these things didn't maybe move the needle as much as we would have liked them to, some of these cleanup actions, but the fact that they were happening did improve the site, did improve water quality, did move the needle to some extent. And it happened without having to take massive steps backwards, without doubling down again on the same practices that got us here in the first place. There are other alternatives besides just doubling the footprint of the mine in order to raise funds essentially to do this cleanup. And it becomes, a little more hard to swallow as a restoration plan when you drill into what's included in the impact statement, that some of this restoration isn't going to happen for over 100 years. And the fact that that's the best solution that this company is putting forward to reclaim the site really makes it kind of hard to view in my mind as a true restoration plan, considering all the other things that have been happening in the drainage and already were happening within the mine site itself. So that's a pretty quick and dirty rundown of some of the past, remediation that has happened on site. And we hope to see more of that, but we did see that we did have our other presenter squeak in, so we are ready to get him on here. Let's see if I can unmute and get Emmett to join us here. And with that too, I'll hand it over and just reintroduce who we're being joined by tonight. So we're really honored to have Emmett Taylor Jr., Nez Perce tribal member and director of the Nez Perce Watershed Division, and Wesley Keller, who's been with the tribe for 17 years in their Watershed Division and is based out of the McCall area. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to these two to kind of share some of the work that they've been overseeing and provide a little more context on South Fork of the Salmon and some of the work that they're doing. So just let me know when to advance slides and take it away, guys.
Okay, can you hear me?
We can, yeah.
Good.
You can hear me? Okay. All right, thanks. Yeah, my name is again, thanks again for having us. My name is Emmett Taylor, and yeah, like Nick said, I'm the director for the Nez Perce Tribe's Fisheries Watershed Division. I've been working for my tribe. I'm a Nez Perce tribal member, and I've been working for my tribe for, I don't know, 25 years now going on, I guess. I kind of quit counting at about 10, I guess. I don't know. Seems like it's getting quite a bit, but yeah. And then we got Wes Keller on. He's our project leader for down in the South Fork Salmon, and Wes, he's the guy on the ground really making things happen. Yeah, I'm just glad to be here. I had to go up to Spokane today. I live in Lapwai. Spokane's about 2 hours away, but I had to go up and help my son today. I had to take some leave, and I was getting back here. I had plenty of time. And then I hit some fog and some snow and some bad roads. And from Colfax to here is about an hour, and that took me about 2.5 hours. So I just showed up about 5 minutes ago. So I'm glad I'm able to make it. But anyways, I just really appreciate Idaho Rivers United inviting us to come and speak tonight. And I just really appreciate, Idaho Rivers United and what they do, what they stand for, and all of the work that they do to protect and restore rivers. And, I'd just like to thank everybody that's on the call or on the Zoom here tonight. The subject of Stibnite is, very passionate to a lot of us. And I just really appreciate, everybody and their work, their attention, their passion for the natural resources for the river and everything. And the Nez Perce tribe really appreciates everybody's work on that. So we can go ahead and go to the next slide. So the presentation we're going to give tonight. So I'm going to start it off, and then Wes is going to take over, and then I'm going to take one slide kind of towards the end, and then Wes will finish it out for us. But we're going to talk first about, the location and importance of the South Fork Salmon River to the tribe and fisheries. I don't know how many people are familiar with the Nez Perce tribe, but I thought I'd give a little background on that to start out with. Then we'll talk kind of about the focal species in the South Fork Salmon River, some of the limiting factors, and how we're addressing, those limiting factors for salmon, doing everything we can to try to restore the habitat for these fish in the South Fork salmon in that whole area down there. And then, some of the, the concerns that the tribe has with Stibnite Gold Project, which is, the same as, a lot of you that are on this Zoom. Go ahead, you can move to the next one. So I start out with this. This is, so that it just says the lands and waters of the Nez Perce traditional territory represented the natural capital, which allowed us to survive and prosper. So, there's some creation stories that we have that establish that relationship between us and the natural environment and the animals and the fish and the roots and the berries and all those sorts of things. Our people, historically and to this day, we still gather resources, at all elevations at all times of the year. And I like to use kind of our roots as kind of that example. So, right at the beginning in the springtime, like right around March-ish or so, that's when the kikite comes out. And that's at the very, very low elevation. And we go out there and we gather that first. Then after that is the Kaus. It comes out about a month later, a little bit higher. Then we got the Chemis, which is a little bit higher than that. Then we got the Sawit, which is it's a wild carrot that we gather. And then we have the Kaus, which is a little bit higher up. So it's just like, it's like all times of the year at all elevations. You can say the same thing like for the fish here. We start out with, we call them tsuyum, which is, or mukits. I'm sorry, tsuyum is fish, but mukits is the suckers. They're the first ones that come into our streams here. And those are the ones that we'd gather first, then the heye, the steelhead would come in, and then the various fish species all throughout the year that we would gather. And so, this picture up here on the left here, that's my great-great-grandmother up at Muscle Shoal Meadows gathering some Chemis. And, so I'm very, very proud of that picture, but you can go to the next slide. And just for people that don't know, this is the Nez Perce tribes. So what you see, the outline of the green and kind of that turquoise kind of color there, that's what's called the exclusive use area of the Nez Perce tribe. So that's where the exclusive use area of where our people resided. But we went far and wide to gather our resources. So we went all the way over to Montana, Buffalo country. We went all the way to the mouth of the Columbia River to gather fish and lamprey and those sorts of things. We went, and this is actually beyond this. We went up into Canada. We went much further south. So we went for a long area. But the South Fork salmon area was a really important place for us too. And, it's about in where the ICC is, where the South Fork salmon is. But you can go to the next slide. And so a really important provision. So I don't know how many people know about the treaty. There's a treaty between the Nez Perce tribe and the federal government that was established in 1855. And this was established really because of of settlers that were coming into the area and the conflicts that were happening between the tribe and those settlers. And we actually, through this treaty, we ceded about 5 million acres of land, but we retained rights throughout that whole area. And there's a provision in that treaty here. It's Article 3, and like I just talked about, so our people, not only we just gathered these things that I talked about previously, over all times of the year at all elevations, we just had a relationship with the natural world. And our the signers of the treaty at this time, they really had that vision, and that they wanted to keep that for our people so that we could take care of ourselves, so we could keep that relationship. And so this provision was put into this treaty, and it's, the right of taking fish at all usual custom places, together with the privilege of hunting, gathering roots and berries, and pasturing the horses and cattle upon open and unclaimed lands. And so our treaty, our chiefs during that time, it was critical for them to keep these provisions there so that we can continue our way of life. Go ahead, you can go to the next one. And so this slide here, so I got some stats up here. This is from a report that was done by the Columbia River Intertribal Fish Commission. They did it on all four of the treaty tribes in the Columbia. And I just have some stats here, and families in poverty. This is for the Nez Perce. At that time, this report's a little bit dated, but families in poverty, almost 30%. Unemployment rates were high. The ratio of tribal death rate compared to non-tribal was almost twice. And I don't show those stats, for people to feel sorry for our tribe or our people or anything, but we do have challenges with these different things, with alcoholism and suicide and these different things with our people, and we just have these challenges that are there. But then I grabbed this quote from he's an elder in our tribe that's still with us. His name is Leroy Seth. But this quote that he said that I grabbed just, I think, really gets to the heart of what really important for the work that we do. But I'm just going to go ahead and read it. But it says, traditional activities such as fishing, hunting, and gathering roots, berries, and medicinal plants also build self-esteem for Nez Perce peoples. And this has the capability to reduce the level of death by accident, violence, and suicide affecting our people. When you engage in cultural activities, you build pride. You're helped to understand what it is to be Nez Perce, or Nimipu, as that we call ourselves. In this way, the salmon, the game, the roots and the berries and the plants are the pillars of our world. And I just really think that, this really just gets truly at the heart of why it is we fight so hard against things, say like Stibnite, or we fight so hard to try to restore the resources, because we got to have these resources available in this connection to the landscape to do these things that Leroy was pointing out in this quote. And you can go to the next one. So this is just a couple of pictures, South Fork salmon, me, myself personally, I have, my family's been going down there for, I don't know how long, fishing for generations. And this is actually my Uncle Bob. He's the one in there using a dip net to fish. And my nephew's Joe on the right, and Stephen has the fishing pole over there. And we go down as a family every year, and we spend at least a week down there going down to fish for salmon. But not only fish for salmon, but we gather some meat or huckleberries, cows. There's different things other things that we gather down there, but it's really just a connection to that area. And one thing I'll just share with you guys, so this last year we went down to go fishing. And that was probably the first time I went down there in my family in probably 5 years, because the 4 years previous, like everybody's probably aware, the salmon runs were so low that there was not enough for a harvest. I think one year there was, but there was the runs were so low that there just wasn't enough there. And so, my son went down with me this last year, and he's gone with me since he's been a baby. And so that had been 5 years ago, the last time we went. So he was about 12. Now he's, up 18 years old. And last year when we went down there, and he was like, we're going up and down the river, and he was like trying to remember. And I'm like, I was looking at him one time, and he was kind of looking at the river, and he was like, I remember this hole. I think I remember this one right here. And we go up a little bit more, and he's like, oh yeah, I think it's coming back to me. But I mean, the point I guess I'm making is when you don't have when the fish isn't there, we don't go there to fish, and we lose that connection. We lose that connection, not just to go down there to, for fun or sport to fish, but I mean, we lose a connection to that place. And my son was losing that connection. He was losing that connection because that resource wasn't there. And that gets exactly to the slide I just talked about, where if we don't have those resources or that to connect to the fish, to the river, to that landscape, to the land right there, we lose what it is for us to be able to call ourselves Nimipu. We lose what it is for us to know who we are as a people. And when we do that, that's what leads to all those other things that are so destructive to our people. And you can go to the next slide, Wes. And then this slide here is just a little zoomed in on kind of where the Stibnite Gold Project is. And so, it's within of course, our exclusive use area where we went, for since time immemorial to fish, to gather, to hunt, for just for everything. And you can see it right there. And then outlined in the blue and the green is, of course, the South Fork salmon and Big Creek. And that's where we have, we're doing a lot of watershed restoration work, including the little salmon too. But Wes here has really been, he works, him and his staff are incredibly passionate about what they do. And they've really done a lot of work to try to restore, the watersheds, the fish, the water quality in that area. And so I'm going to turn it over to Wes now, and he's going to talk more specifically about, the work that we've done, not only just in watershed, but with our production program and our research program, to try to restore these resources in not just in the East Fork, South Fork, but kind of in that area. And then we'll kind of zoom into the Stibnite area as well. So with that, I'll just go ahead and turn it over to Wes.
Great. Thank you, Emmett. And yeah, just real quick, like to echo Emmett's point, thanks again, everyone, for joining. It's an honor to be here. Nick, if you could move to the next slide. And so Emmett kind of talked about the cultural and spiritual side of the fish to the Nez Perce tribe. In this South Fork salmon watershed, there are 3 ESA listed fish species, and these are Endangered Species Act fish, meaning these fish have been, placed as endangered because their numbers have been brought to such low conditions. And so rather than, just sit back and say, hey, the number's getting low and complain, the Nez Perce tribe's really been a leader. They have about a 200-person fishery program. And in just the South Fork alone, that watershed that includes the East Fork and so forth, they're spending about $2.5 million a year to restore these fish. So again, they're actively working hard to get these fish numbers back for the reasons that Emmett stressed. And so in this watershed, we have Chinook salmon, we have steelhead, and we have bull trout. And I want to point out how unique it is to have all 3 of these species right in the South Fork salmon, right up in the East Fork, literally above the glory hole, and below the glory hole, you have bull trout. You have steelhead right up to the glory hole on the project area, and you have Chinook salmon that go right up to the glory hole. And I've watched them many times try to get above that passage without any luck. The tribe has outplanted fish above that, meaning they'll take them and release them above so that we have fish spawning in the East Fork of the South Fork. But we're lucky to have these 3 fish in this area. With the next slide, please. So I want to stress the importance of the South Fork salmon watershed. And this historically, the South Fork salmon watershed produced one of the largest Chinook salmon runs in the entire Columbia River Basin. I want to say that again, one of the largest Chinook salmon runs in the entire Columbia River Basin. That's a lot of fish. Researchers estimate that the South Fork salmon watershed historically contributed about 60 to 70% of all adult summer Chinook salmon runs in Idaho. So again, like I stressed, that the Nez Perce tribe hatchery, and Emmett mentioned this, there's a hatchery side of this, there's a research side, and then there's a watershed side of this. And I'll be talking about how these kind of work together so we can bring these fish back. So if you can go to the next slide. So you can see, I'm going to just kind of show you, and the point of this slide is to show you how much work is going on in these watersheds. And you can see the East Fork of the South Fork, that's kind of where the Stibnite mine is. But in red, as you can see, we have pit tag arrays. These are really neat things that researchers are using. Imagine they put a pit tag into these fish. It's about the size of a grain of rice. And imagine this is like you go up to a grocery store scanner and scan your grocery. These fish, when they swim over these arrays, it scans them. It can tell who tagged them, how big they were when they were tagged, the date they were tagged. So we can get a lot of really good information about fish coming into the system and fish leaving out of the system from these pit tags arrays. In orange, we have weirs, and sorry they didn't show up the greatest. It's the 2 purple lines. And these are areas where our research folks will take the fish. They'll be able to get genetic samples off of these fish, be able to mark these fish to see, where they're going, how far up they're going, if they're hatchery, if they're wild. We can get a lot of information like that. And the areas in yellow are screw traps. And these are traps that catch juvenile fish out migrating. And so we have some on the Watershed River, one on the South Fork, some in Johnson Creek. The point of the slide is we have really good fish in, fish out data from our research division. We know how many fish are coming back, when they're leaving, how many are going. So we've been able to really study this South Fork salmon watershed in some great detail. If you go to the next slide. And so, over the years, this story of how Chinook are doing has really been an up and down. And I want to use this slide to illustrate the work that the Nez Perce tribe have done to restore Chinook salmon. So what you're looking at is Johnson Creek, which flows into the East Fork of the South Fork. And you can see that these are Chinook red counts. And so what a red is when a Chinook, when the females come back in, they'll use their tail and they'll dig a nest to lay their eggs in. And you can go and count these reds, and it tells you how many of these nests, and each one of these has about 3,000 to 4,000 eggs. And you can get an idea how many of these fish are coming back. So we can see in the early 1950s or late 1950s, we start seeing this drastic decline in fisheries. We got to about around 1995, there was only 5 Chinook reds in all of Johnson Creek, and this was an all-time low. So the tribe stepped in, and this is when they started their program kind of in the South Fork of the Salmon. And so as you can see, it took some time, but the line on the left is showing that downward trend, and the line on the right, we can see that this trend is going up. And now we're seeing about 270 reds per year. And this is a massive increase, and we still have a long ways to go, but this is solely on the efforts of the Nez Perce tribe to restore the harms of the past that have been done to some of these watersheds. So if you go to the next slide. So I'm going to talk real quick about some of the limiting factors. And what that means is, what are the things in the watershed? What are the impacts that limit fisheries from recovering? And so I'm going to talk about excess fine sediment and give you a little history on that, impaired fish passage, degraded riparian conditions, and one I left off that I'll talk on is water quality, and that relates directly to that Stibnite mine. So if we go to the next slide. So it's really important in the South Fork salmon, one thing to really note is the unique geology that is present. The area in gray under this map is the Idaho batholith. And this really denotes a geologic layer that, and you can see it covers most of the South Fork salmon. So this batholith is really interesting. It's characterized by decomposing granitics. So a Forest Service fishery biology once referred to the South Fork salmon as a sandbox at about a 45-degree angle, just kind of bent down. And so really, when you remove, the vegetation and the root structure is what's holding this whole hillside geology together. And if you remove this vegetation, you build roads and you mine and remove that vegetation, again, that beach sand and that image of a sandbox at an angle, you start getting huge amounts of erosion. So if you go to the next slide here. So what you're looking at here is between the 1950s and 60s, about 800 miles of logging roads were constructed in the South Fork salmon. This is a picture of the Cow Creek sub-watershed, and it's really an example of the high density, it's like jammer style logging roads that occurred on this steep erodible geology. You go to the next slide. In 1964 and 1965, there were some huge historic rain on snow events that were magnified by these high road densities on these log hillsides. Again, they removed the vegetation, they built these roads, the hillsides become unstable. This resulted in massive road failures. You can see in the yellow kind of circled on this is a person standing there for size and scope of this, but it delivered huge amounts of sediment into these streams. And if you go to the next slide. So Chinook salmon and steelhead and bull trout all need gravel and good interstitial space to lay their eggs. And so you can look at this picture right here. It looks like, you're at the ocean. There's so much beach sand in there, so much sand in there. So this 64-65 event led to greater than 65% embeddedness of the mainsaid South Fork. That means that, anything, if fish came back here and tried to lay their eggs, they would be smothered by sediment and you would have very little productivity or very little survivalship. So this was when it's its all-time worst. And so they put a moratorium on this logging after it became just apparent that due to this geology, it's not compatible with the fisheries that are here. And so if you go to the next slide. So how do you reverse the wrongs of the past? One of these things is actively trying to remove the problem of some of these issues. And so, I don't know if you look at this image right here, this is the old road that led to Stoley Meadows. And you can see kind of up front, there's a landslide that's come down. And as you work your way back towards the excavator, you can see what this excavator is doing is road decommissioning. So this road here it continued to have landslides because it's on unstable ground. And these landslides would go into the South Fork of the Salmon, and we would get erosion going into the river that would smother the Chinook salmon red eggs, and we get lower productivity of fish coming back. So the tribe's been using road decommissioning, and this is really where you take a road that is prone to erosion and you get rid of it. If there's a road that you no longer need, you fully recontour this road. And what this does is it breaks up the surface area, the compaction. It allows water to pass in a normal fashion over the landscape, not pond on the road and cause landslides and erosion. And so to date, we've been really successful. And this is just in the South Fork Salmon Watershed. We have decommissioned 241 miles of road. That's full recontour, similar to that image that you're looking right there. 51 of these miles were in riparian areas, and we restored 308 stream crossings so that we start reducing the amount of sediment that goes into the stream to kind of remedy the wrongs of the past. If you'll go to the next slide. Sorry, this is a little busy, but I'll walk you through it. What you're looking at here, I'm going to talk about. We also will go out and gather data on system roads that aren't going anywhere. And anyone who's driven up past Chinook Campground, if you're going up to Warren, there's the Long Gulch Road up there. And then what you're looking at, these dots, we went up and surveyed these roads, and the dots show where sediment is coming into the stream. And so if the dots on the stream on the red on the left, those are Chinook reds. So we try to grab data and figure out where can our restoration do the most benefit to fisheries. Because everything that comes down Long Gulch is going to go in, any sediment will go into Nez River. We want to stop that erosion from reaching those reds. And so if you go to the next photo, I'll kind of show you some examples of what we did. So again, here's that Long Gulch Road. We can see a lot of rilling that as the water comes off the road, it goes into the drainage ditch. You see that photo on the upper right as it goes into the stream, and it smothers eggs and it fills interstitial spaces, and it's overall not good for fish. So some of the things we did is we pulled the road back away from the river. We added gravel, we crowned the road, we added cross drains. And so if there's roads that aren't needed, those roads are decommissioned. If there's roads that have to stay in the landscape because they're important for transportation, we're going to improve them so we get less sediment going into those streams to reduce the impact of that on these fish. If you go to the next slide, this is just another example. This was an area that was a road-related landslide, the old South Fork Salmon River Road. And I think Mary Farrow's on the call. She was the ranger at the time that said, yes, let's fix this. So we were able to decommission the South Fork Salmon Road in partnership with a lot of the work we do. When I say this is work we're doing, I want to give a shout out. We work in partnership very closely and very well with the Payette National Forest and the Boise National Forest. So this one right here was on the Boise National Forest. And you can see this landslide was continuously every year sloughing more and more material into the stream. And there's Chinook spawning right throughout this reach. So we went in, recontoured it, replanted it, reshaped. This photo's old. If we had I wish I had a more recent photo because you can barely tell that landslide's there. It's really healing up quick. Just kind of another example. So if you go to the next slide, the Payette National Forest has one of the longest running data sets. It's a pretty remarkable data set. They've been collecting sediment samples in areas where Chinook salmon spawn. And so we can see, we're really making a lot of progress from all this restoration. We have to do more, continue to keep this trend going. But things kind of like we saw with the Chinook salmon numbers coming back up, we're making some really good headway here on reducing the amount of sediment from historic conditions. You go to the next slide. Another limiting factor for fish is a lot of times throughout the Forest Service land, there's a lot of undersized culverts. And so looking at these culverts, the upper left is Bergdorf Creek before. And so what happens is because the flow gets so condensed, these fish have a hard time swimming through these culverts, and they're not able to access miles and miles of habitat above these culverts. And so when we find an undersized culvert, we work with the Forest Service, we write grants, or we use the tribe's funding from BPA, and we replace them. The one below is the end product, and it provides, aquatic organism passage for all species, all life stages. The one on the right is Cox Creek. This was done on Wapiti Ranch, again, an undersized culvert that is replaced with a box culvert. And instantly, when we went up and took eDNA samples, this is environmental eDNA, where you can see what fish species are present in the stream. We opened up miles of habitat from some of these projects. If you go to the next slide, another limiting factor, especially along Johnson Creek and some of these areas, are degraded riparian habitat, where from grazing, from road activities, from human-induced activities, we get riparian areas falling into the stream, again causing sediment issues. Riparian areas are critical for providing shade to the stream, for providing large woody debris, and so we have to have good, healthy riparian areas for fish. And so the photo on the left was up at Bergdorf Meadows. The tribe has a conservation easement up there and restored some of those. And again, I wish I had a more recent photo. They've really come along. And down below is Ice Hole Campground. There was a lot of user-created activity in the riparian area, so it's just building some fence, graveling these roads, working in partnership with the Boise National Forest to really make good, healthy riparian areas. We're also working on conservation easements and land acquisitions. And so the tribe's been really successful in using conservation easements to protect lands. Up in Bergdorf Meadows, which is the bottom left, and the Wapiti Meadow Ranch in the upper right, we've been able to protect over 223 acres so that can never be developed. These are really important areas, both of these, for elk calving grounds, and they're adjacent. The one at Wapiti is some of the most important spawning in all of Johnson Creek. And the one at Bergdorf is, if anyone's been up there, this is where Chinook salmon spawn. So when you have areas that are so important that you cannot lose them, we've been really looking for land acquisition or conservation easements. And this slide, I apologize. I hate it when anyone throws a slide of this. It's just crazy. So I'm just going to summarize. All I'm trying to show you here is a lot of work's been done since 2008 to 2021. We have been able to, like I said, to decommission 241 miles of road. These are massive landscape size projects. For road improvements, we've been able to improve over 30 miles of road, 8.4 in this RCA right next to the stream. On the bridges, for culverts and so forth, we've been able to reconnect 46 miles of streams. We put 8 bridges in. We've done culverts, small undersized culverts to AOP culverts of pass. We've been able to do, I can't even read my own handwriting there. We have 9. And so, for plantings, again, we've done 13,000 plantings. The whole point of the slide, and I'm sorry for the busyness of it, but is really to show you that the tribe has been actively, and this is just our watershed division, actively doing large-scale restoration in the South Fork salmon to remedy the wrongs of some of the past land uses. That leads us to the next slide. So a huge part of this is also improving and protecting water quality. So another limiting factor to the recovery of fish is degraded water quality. So we have some 303D listed streams, Sugar Creek being one of them for mercury and antimony. And so some of these streams, in order for the fish to really recover, we have to have good, clean water. And this will, we'll talk more of this and why we're opposed to the Stibnite Gold Project. But we're working currently with EPA on the Cinnabar mine site, which is one drainage over from the Stibnite site. And what we're trying to do there is there's a lot of mercury coming out of that site that's been impacting fisheries for a lot of years. So that's one way we're trying to improve water quality. Another way we're trying to improve water quality is opposing the Stibnite mine. And so with the next slide, I'm going to let Emmett give you kind of a little bit of why the tribe is so opposed to gold and the Stibnite project.
All right, thanks, Wes. Yeah, so, gold is a very sensitive subject to the Nez Perce tribe. Like I talked about earlier, so we had our exclusive use area, which is described here, like the outside of the blue and the orange there. And we had our Treaty of 1855, which you can see was reduced our reservation by about 5.5 million acres. And then in 1863, there was another treaty that was established. But the reason why that 1863 treaty was established was just north of the Orange Treaty Reservation boundary. You can see in the middle there, in the Weippe area, gold was discovered. And I think there was, it says, 50,000. I think there's 20,000 that went to the Weippe area in just a very short amount of time. Lewiston, Idaho, which was the capital of Idaho, was an illegal town. It was on the Nez Perce Reservation is when it was established. And it was a area where it was, where miners got supplies to go out to where they were. But because of the discovery of gold is why the United States government wanted to reduce our reservation again from the 1855 boundary to the 1863 boundary. And because of that discovery of gold. And, that really, and then when they did that, they called that we call that the Steel Treaty. But, so the bands and the Nez Perce tribal bands that were outside of that reservation boundary, like the Chief Joseph Band, which was over in the Wallowa County, the Whitebird Band, Pio, he was in the kind of in the Whitebird area right now. Chief Tahul Hulchut, he was in that South Fork Salmon River area is where he was. And so all of those bands that did not sign the treaties were being forced to go on to the 1863 treaty reservation. And, there was a lot of things that happened, but, then ended up the War of 1877, which was a very traumatic and sad event for our Nez Perce people. But it all, resulted, a lot of this happened because of gold. And so, the tribe is very, like I stated earlier, very sensitive to that subject. And so when this topic came up, there's a lot of gold mines. Stibnite is not the only one. Believe me, in our area, Stibnite is the only one. We're dealing with them all over the place, not only just, mines like this one. This is probably the biggest one that's out there, but there's other ones, a lot of other ones out there that we're dealing with, suction dredging and all that sort of stuff. But for this one here in specific on Stibnite, we know the history of Stibnite. We know the history of those mining companies that have come in, a lot of them that have come in and said a lot of the same things that's, that Perpetua or Midas Gold was saying, where they were going to come in, restore the site and all this other stuff and mine, and they left and they just leave a bunch of destruction there. So, the tribe has done a lot of work. Wes and his crew and other tribal employees have done a lot of work to evaluate the Stibnite mine and on its merits on itself, and there's very much a lot of concern and impact, and the tribe has officially come in opposition of this mine. And but yeah, so it's just a really sensitive topic, and I'll go ahead and turn it back over to Wes, and Wes is going to talk a little bit more in detail about Stibnite and the resources and the fisheries work that we're doing there.
So again, you guys, I apologize, this is another busy slide, but I'm going to walk you through it. I mean, what we're really looking for is we're going down Johnson Creek Road. And then for the first couple of years, and I apologize, we have still the name Midas Gold, and it should be Perpetua Resources. But, for the first couple of years before they have the burnt log route, if that's the way things go, they're going to be hauling a lot of material and a lot of equipment in along the Johnson Creek Road. What some of this busyness on the slide is just to illustrate how much work the tribe is doing in these areas. So again, there's the red dots where we know we have high density of Chinook spawning all along the river, the entire way along Johnson Creek. As soon as you get further down by that burnt log area where it comes in, We have high density spawning in there. We've been doing road obliteration. The tribe's got weirs. We have conservation easements. We have screw traps. So all this work that the tribe's been doing is going to be greatly impacted for these 2 years. And even after that, when they move, if they do go to the burn log route, it really stifles the tribe's ability to recover these fish. So you have a twofold thing. One is all the impacts, and we'll talk about those in a second, that impact the tribe's resources. And the second are the impacts of just them. One fuel spill could be catastrophic in Johnson Creek. One sack of antimony concentrate could be catastrophic. So it's just a close proximity to the tribe's restoration and the tribe's work to Stibnite's or Perpetua Resources actions throughout that area. We go to the next slide. So I'm not going to get super detailed into the specific concerns, where right now we are writing our comments on the SDIS, the Supplemental Draft Environmental Impact Statement. And I would encourage everyone who is passionate about the South Fork area and the East Fork area to submit whatever comments you can in the capacity that you can. But some of the areas that have really jumped up on the tribe's radar are air quality. Again, this is right next to the Frank Church Wilderness area, and has a lot of potential to impact air quality. Fisheries, as we stated, you can imagine a gold mine in the headwaters of an important fishery is not a good mix. This could be all sorts of trouble, from increased water temperatures to disconnection of fish passage to water quality issues. The list goes on, and you guys will be able to see our supplemental draft environment, our SDIS comments, and be able to look through that. But imagine when you go into a site like this and you double the size of the footprint, like Nick said, you're going to alter the hydrology, you're going to alter water quality. There's already issues up there with mercury, antimony, and arsenic, and that's going to be magnified. There'll be impacts to wildlife. That burnt log route goes through amazing elk habitat, wolverine habitat, white bark pine. There's cultural issues where the tribe has cultural sites up there. Geochemistry is going to be altered. Again, large scale alterations of streams, placing the tailings that don't go away. Those are there forever. And you have one leak, like one issue, and maybe that's 100 years from now. Maybe they have an amazing liner that lasts longer than anything we've known of. But 100 years from now, that liner starts leaking. Where's Perpetua? Where's that money? It's gone. You know, who's going to be taking care of this? Well, if history repeats itself, it's going to be, we'll see. You know, last time it's been the Forest Service and the taxpayer dollar that's been routinely cleaning up this mess after numerous, mines come through the area. So if you go to the next slide, sorry, there should be one more slide. If you go back one, Nick, let me see. Some reason it got missed. So this is, I'll just summarize this next slide. One of the questions Nick asked us to talk on is, how do we restore the Stibnite site without Perpetua Resources? And it's a good question. You know, I mean, they're coming in and saying, hey, it's a brownfield site. We're going to use the issue of gold, all the problems that came with gold. We're going to use gold to solve those issues. I'm very skeptic of that. But our restoration program, the tribe's Watershed Division and the South Fork Salmon, began in 2007. And we had funding from Bonneville Power to address the fish passage barrier at the Stibnite Glory Hole. And this is where, you know, fish can't get over this because of past mining activities. The fish come into the Glory Hole and they can't get up the steep passage because there's a 30-foot tall cascade. And so we were going to come in and rehabilitate that 1 mile of fish habitat, open it up. But after that, we got the funding and so forth to do that. The landowner of the Glory Hole, you know, this is basically Midas Gold at the time, entered into a lease to purchase option. And then they said, hey, we're going to start mining here again. So we weren't able to restore that fish passage. And so consequently, we walked away from that, saying, hey, we're not going to spend a lot of money when they're going to come in and mine this again. So it's one of those ideas where they said, hey, you have to have us to build a 0.9 mile fish tunnel around the area. There's other ways, and the tribe's been doing some really large scale landscape. I'm not saying the tribe's ready to take on cleaning up that entire site, but we have things like circle. And I think it was mentioned by Sydney that EPA listed the site, in national priority list in 2001, but the state didn't concur. If perpetual resources doesn't stand the test of time and goes away, we should really be focusing on large scale cleanup at the site, regardless of perpetual resources. And with that, I'll stop, and I guess questions for Emmett or myself, we can do our best to answer.
Great. Thanks, Wes. Thank you, Emmett. Yeah, thank you so much for joining us tonight and spending some time and providing all that great insight. I think it's we hear so much about the work being done tangentially. It's really an honor to get the firsthand knowledge from y'all and just get more insight into what's being done and support the work that is happening in this watershed. And with that, we'd love to open it up to any questions that anybody in the audience may have for either Emmett or Wesley or Sydney or myself, and we'll see what we can come up with. But just go ahead and put any questions in the chat and we'll see what we got. While we're waiting, I think, Wes, one of your slides, you kind of mentioned the limiting factors, for fisheries recovery. And every single one of those are, just alarm bells went off as far as things that we're personally or IRU is concerned about and are writing our comments on that are going to be negatively impacted from, this project if it does go forward.
Yeah, no doubt about that. From when you just the amount of devegetation that occurs when you build 15 new miles of road to burnt log, 9 new miles of road along the power lines, when you all the devegetation that happens at the site, the pit walls, that's where you get sedimentation. And the geology here, as we stressed, is not like other places. It's very, very erosive, a lot of potential for a lot of sedimentation.
Tom, we have a question from Tom asking if one of us can talk to the concern of sulfide mining and pollution and how big of an issue is that. I'm not sure if anyone here, I personally am not a geochemist to know specifically as far as the sulfide mining, what makes that a little more problematic than others. I don't know if anyone else has a stab at that one.
We won't go deep into that, but the concern is you get acid rock drainage, and once the ARD is a really nasty thing. When you get conditions that the pH changes the pH, and then you start getting the release of more minerals out of rock. Again, there's probably geologists on this call right here that could do a better job answering, so I won't go into detail, but I know Stibnite has been looked at, and they've said that the risk of that acid rock drainage is lower than other areas. I can't answer to that. That would be something that someone who is like John Rigg or someone else who maybe is on the phone would do a way better job answering that.
And Audrey had a question about U.S. Forest Service repository for some of that mine waste, and that is a great question. A lot of the past remediation work, it's kind of a hunt to try to find some of the info of where a lot of the info lives, and especially when multiple agencies are involved. That I didn't have a great answer when I was looking into that in preparation for this. I'm not sure if anyone on the chat or on the call knows exactly if that was on site or off site that it was moved towards, but it was primarily moved out of the riparian area and out of contact waters from what I could figure out. Great. Any other questions from folks? Well, I got one that just came in. Let's see. It's a good one from Mark. Let's see. Just trying to read it, Mark. It's a long question. Just trying to see if I can summarize it here. Let's see. So Mark just has kind of a question going back to the Treaty of 1855, and the guaranteed right to fish in usual and accustomed places. And just the fact that, there's private property in the form of these patented claims within these lands, is that in itself a violation of treaty rights, or kind of how does this all fit into that mix with patented mining claims and, private land that's now within the ceded territory?
Yeah, so this is Emmett, and thanks for that question. And I'll tell you, I'm not a lawyer. I'm a tribal member who's read my treaty, and I try to do my best to understand it and everything. There's been a lot of case law on it and everything. But so as far as the Treaty of 1855, at the Stibnite site itself, so the federal government, so through that treaty, we have reserved rights that I showed earlier in the presentation, and those rights are dependent upon, those resources have to be there in order to be able to exercise those treaty rights. And so the federal government has a trust responsibility to the Nez Perce tribe to make sure that those resources are there so that we can exercise those treaty rights. And so with the Stibnite mine, so for those actions, so they're doing their, so the EIS. So that's where, we really lean hard. We really push hard on the federal government. And it's kind of weird because we got to deal with EPA. We got to deal with, with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. We got to deal with U.S. Forest Service, all these different branches of the federal government. But to us, it's all just the federal government, right? You guys, the federal government, have a trust responsibility to us, the Nez Perce tribe, to make sure that these resources are there. And whether it happens, what's happening on the private land, that gets a little bit more tricky. But in the end, they still have to ensure that those are there. And we're trying to hold them accountable to that. And with these various administrations, you go back one administration, those guys would just, give you the finger and turn around and leave, right? This one we're a little bit more hopeful on, but it doesn't matter which administration it is, we still try to hold it, we don't try. We push the administration to make sure that they keep their trust responsibility to the Nez Perce tribe, because the Nez Perce tribe gave up an incredible amount, as a part of everything that's happened. And so we do we just don't try to hold them accountable, but we are doing everything that we can as well to, to restore all these resources in there. Everything that Wes described, all the work that Wes and his crew is doing and the tribe's doing down there, and it's not just for the benefit of the Nez Perce tribe, it's for the benefit for us, for all of us, and so, and there's nothing makes me more mad than it was Midas Gold at the beginning, some mining company from freaking Canada coming down and trying to wreck our area, our rivers, our streams, and gonna come and wreck it and leave. And so maybe I kind of got off subject and got a little fired up there, but anyways, thanks for the question.
No, I think that's right in line, but I think you're echoing a lot of what we all feel, that's for sure. If there's aren't any other questions, we're a little bit over time. But let's see if we have any other. Let's see. Okay, we have one from Beth. So Beth is curious how to write about and advocate for Indigenous cultures in the watershed. Let's see. So Beth just had a question, basically how to, in comments, or how to advocate for Indigenous cultures, Indigenous voices that are impacted by projects such as this, not being Indigenous herself, how to be a respectful ally in a project like this.
I would say, if us as a Nez Perce tribe, we're going to speak, for ourselves. We're going to do, we're going to speak on our cultural resources, on the fisheries, on the wildlife, on everything like that. But so that's a tricky place there. I would say you know, we're gonna take care of ourselves. You have your perspective too, and I know a lot of people on here align with the way the tribe thinks too, and you just need to speak your perspective, your passion, your, you know, everything that you think about this project, you know. So you know, I don't think that you need to speak, you know, I really appreciate, I truly appreciate, because I think there's, you know, there's a lot of people that are like-minded like us, like the tribe. I appreciate the question. You know, I'm not saying that you need to speak first or anything like that, because we're going to do that, but do that for your, you know, for yourself, from your perspective. And we really appreciate, you know, I appreciate really the question, and appreciate, you know, people, you know, doing what you're going to do to comment on this and provide your perspective on this project.
And one thing on that too, Emmett, is for folks that haven't been to the tribe's website, Dig for the Truth, I strongly recommend you go there. And then on that is the tribes, you'll find in the, like, I think one of the tabs that has supplemental information, and the tribe's resolution is on there. And this came from NetTech, the governing body of the tribe. And it really speaks clearly to the tribe's feelings on this mine site. And I think, you know, to get a better understanding of where the tribe's coming from and what the voice is on this issue, feel free to read that. And you know, I don't know, Emmett, your thoughts, but that could be something that is cited, that, you know, we support the tribe's resolution. You know, that would be a way to say, hey, this is the tribe's voice, but I support it as well. So that's just an idea, but yeah.
Yeah, that's a great idea, Wes. And yeah, with that, I think, you know, we're already a little bit over the hour, but I do want to thank, you know, Emmett and Wes again. Thank you so much for joining us tonight and all the work that you all are doing in this fight. And really appreciate you spending part of your evening with us and sharing this perspective. And again, thanks to everyone else who joined tonight. If you do have any additional questions, feel free to send us an email, and I put the link to the Forest Service comment portal in chat. I'll do it again now. That really encourage everyone to submit a comment. You can submit multiple if you've already submitted one and you have a new opinion or things came up tonight that you want to add a comment to. There's no limit. You know, feel free to submit another one and let the Forest Service know how you feel about this project. And like Wes said, I know Nez Perce Tribe will be publishing their larger comments. IRU, Save the South Fork, ICL are working on ours as well. So there'll be more information coming in the coming days. But in the meantime, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. And again, thanks everyone for joining us.
Hey, thanks, Nick. I want to really say I appreciate you inviting us, the tribe, to talk. And somebody said something about maybe me being insulted. I'm not insulted at all. And you know, I just really appreciate this opportunity, you know, for us to be able to be a part of this tonight. So thank you.
Absolutely. Well, have a good night, everybody, and we'll hopefully talk soon.
Thanks.
Let's see.